Hello lovelies, I am Kristin. I am the creator of Poppy Patterns, and today I'm going to show you how to make a pair of super cute, easy to make baby pants that are just so soft, so stretchy, very easy to make. I'm going to use a serger. If you'd rather use a regular sewing machine, stick around because I will have some tips at the end of this video that you will find very helpful. So everything you need for this project will be listed in the description below. You can also find this particular pattern on my Etsy shop via the link in the description as well. First step you're going to want to take is to cut everything out. I love using this rotary cutter and cutting mat. It just makes life so much easier and faster, but if you'd prefer to just use the traditional scissors and pattern method, that is totally fine. With right sides together, you're going to go ahead and stitch the side seams and that inseam. And once that's completed, you can press them and pull the pattern right side out and press those seams flat again. You're going to fold the cuff with right sides together and stitch along this line. And I like to just chain stitch, so it's just not even cutting that piece off, just picking up the next cuff and continuing on that same chain. Trimming your threads and of course pressing those seams would be ideal. Once you have the cuff sewn, you're going to want to fold them so that wrong sides are facing and they're nice and even. You're going to find that the side seam of the cuff, I like to match it up with the inseam of the pants. It's just my preference. You don't have to do that, but I prefer. This particular step of the pattern is really hard because you're working with a really small space. So I almost would recommend not using a serger for this particular section of the pant unless you're experienced and are okay with going really slow. Otherwise, you can just use your regular sewing machine for this particular step and follow those steps that I'll give you at the end of the video just to kind of make life a little easier, because it was definitely very hard to fit that much fabric in such a small area. You're going to want to leave a long chain and thread the extra thread through the seam allowance right here. That will help keep your thread chain from fraying, and it just gives it a nice clean look, and you don't have to worry about any knots or anything like that. And you're going to go ahead and just repeat that to the other cuff and press those seam allowances up towards the top of the pants. And then we'll move along to the waistband here. With right sides together, you're going to go ahead and stitch this seam completely closed. And of course, give it a nice press with some steam, and then open it up a little bit and give it another press, pushing the seam allowance to one direction. And now you're going to want to locate 4 specific points on your waistband. They will be the center front, center back, and side seams. I like to do that by folding my waistband as you see here. And I also really prefer to color coordinate my pins so that way when I'm lining them up to the pants, they will match and make it easier to locate and just creates less work for yourself. The center back of the pants, you're going to want to line that up with the seam of the waistband. So you'll see here, I'm going to point at it. There it is, right there. So I'll have to turn this around and kind of flip it upside down to make it work. And you'll see me figure that out in just a second here. There we go. All right, so yeah, you feed that through. You're going to match up those color coordinated pins, and you're just going to pin that together. as you see me doing here. Side seams, you just take one pin out, you only need one, pin those two parts together. I'm matching that center back. Now for this next step, I went ahead and serged this seam. You don't have to serge it. I almost would recommend, again, just using your regular sewing machine because it really only needs to be a basting stitch. And since I serged this seam, it almost created too much bulk with all of that extra thread at the end of my tutorial. I realized I probably could have just gotten away with just doing a simple stitch, not dealing with all of this extra thread. Up next, you're going to take your elastic band. You're going to overlap this about 1/2 inch and stitch a square, or rather a rectangle, and an X in the middle of that rectangle with your just regular sewing machine is fine. This gives it a really strong holding power, so that way after you insert this, you don't have to worry about it falling out or apart, I should say. And you're going to put this around the waistband, and you're going to go ahead and enclose that as you see here. We just folded that waistband up, and I am now pinning that seam allowance all the way around. You probably don't need this many pins, especially since you'll be using a serger that, like I said earlier, just is kind of a scary thing to do. So the fewer pins, the better in my book. And yeah, you're just gonna go ahead and serge all around that top edge and you're almost done. And just as a side note, you see me kind of running my nails across the fabric there. That's just to see where the elastic band is in relation to my seam allowance. I want to make sure that I'm not stitching through that elastic and it has a bit more freedom to move about in the waistband encasing. So that's what you see happening there. And of course, your last few steps, you're just going to leave that long thread chain and thread it back through your seam allowance and give your seams a nice good press. And you're pretty much done. That is it. Now on to the steps for if you're using your regular sewing machine and you don't have a serger or don't want to use a serger. These are the tips that you've been waiting for. Swap out your regular sewing machine for a ballpoint needle. This will help guide your needle and thread through your fabric rather than punching holes, creating snags, or causing skipped stitches. I like to use a regular zigzag stitch, just 2 millimeters in width, 2 millimeters in length, and try not to push or pull your fabric through. Let the feed dogs do all of the work for you. Always test this out on a test fabric too before sewing your actual project. Once you have this initial stitch done, go ahead and cut back your seam allowance about half. It's going to be about 1/4 inch if you're following my pattern. And go ahead and find a decorative stitch on your sewing machine. It doesn't have to be another zigzag. It can be a little bit more complicated. Just play around with it, see which one you like. And I love to use the widest possible stitch width. That way it kind of encloses that entire seam allowance. And as you see here, I did it on a scrap fabric. Always test it out on your scraps. And you can see it still has that stretch, that give, without compromising the integrity of the project. A lot of the time when you're sewing with your regular sewing machine on knitwear, you may come across these ripples. Just hit it with some steam and that will bounce the fabric back to life. And there you have it, all the tips you need to make yourself a pair of these cute little pants. If you liked this video, give it a thumbs up. If you want to see more tutorials like this, hit that subscribe button. Thank you so much for watching, and I will see you in the next tutorial.